All right, everyone. Again, my name is Eric Brodell. I am our Business and Political Engagement Manager here at People for Bikes. Thank you for joining us. I am joined by Morgan Lomelle, our Director of State and Local Policy. And since we only have 30 minutes, we'll jump right in here.
Great, thanks, Eric. And we're really happy to have a good variety of bike industry on the phone. And what we wanted to do today was just highlight some of our state and local policy work that we're really proud of and that we think really benefits the bike industry by alerting the industry to some good and bad bills and also securing better funding for bicycle infrastructure that we know can lead to better sales and increased ridership. So we're going to kind of give you a sense today of some of the good and bad bills related to bicycling and bicycling infrastructure and state legislatures, and then close off with a few of the ways that if you want to get involved, you can get involved. So 2019 so far has been a pretty active legislative session. Most state legislators are in session debating bills, and as you can imagine, a number of them consider bike and bike infrastructure related items. So I'll go over the good and bad bills and close off with what you can do if you'd like to help. So one thing I always like to start off with is just empowering everyone in the bike industry to realize the contribution that the bike industry makes to the U.S. economy. So if you were to measure bike sales and all the related services and aspects of the industry, it's an $81 billion industry. And that number is huge. It's larger than most major industries. It supports 770,000 jobs. Bike industry has 2,000, or the People for Bikes Coalition has 2,000 supplier and retail members. And then all in all, our industry generates about $10 billion in state and local taxes. And one of the reasons why I like to highlight all of this is because the way that you can really tug on the heartstrings of state legislators and policymakers is by talking about the economic impact of this industry. I never like to admit this truth, but if you go into, fighting a bad bike bill or meeting with an elected official or even someone on the city or local level and start to just talk about bikes all the time, it doesn't always have the same kind of impact that talking about the economic value of your business or of the bike industry would. So just really want to empower folks with these numbers, knowing that we're a strong, vital, and very contributory industry to the U.S. economy. And that gives us a really strong voice when we're advocating for good or bad bike bills. And one last thing, just as an introduction here, we're called People for Bikes. Our work is supported also by the Bicycle Product Suppliers Association. And over the past 4 or 5 years, we really dived into electric bicycle policy as well. We know that electric bikes help get new riders out on bike infrastructure and on bicycles. And a lot of the work that we'll talk about today also involves electric bicycles. So, People for Bikes works on behalf of the bike industry to be the eyes and the ears at the state legislative level, understanding and monitoring all bike bills that relate to either operations or infrastructure access. So what we'll do is we have a monitoring system, and about 25,000 bills come through our system every single year. And this system tracks all the different bills that fall under infrastructure and access. So that would be more funding for bike lanes or, more access for people to ride their bikes in new places. Those bills would cover materials, so a lot of items in regards to chemicals and chemicals that either are or are not allowed in children's products or in bicycles. And our intent there is to make sure that chemicals regulatory actions don't affect bicycle manufacturing. Some relate to operations, so that would be for perhaps requirements for high visibility clothing for bicycles, or some silly bills that we've seen in the past require a 3 or 4 foot flag to be hoisted on the back of your bike as you're riding along day or night. So we want to make sure that there aren't any onerous or kind of silly requirements on operating a bicycle. Obviously, we would defer to anything that's required for safety, for example, flashing red lights at night or things like that. But really onerous bills advanced by legislators who simply don't like bikes or don't really understand bikes, we always fight those off. We monitor all electric bicycle bills, and we're pretty active in introducing e-bike bills as well. We monitor offices of outdoor recreation bills and then bills related to scooters. So I'll get into all of these in a little bit more detail, but the point here of this slide is to really highlight the fact that we have full-time dedicated staff monitoring every single bill that could affect the bike industry, either for good or for bad. And we'll pull about 250 bills out of that 25,000 every year and keep track of them on a daily basis, making sure that if the bike industry needs to know about a bad bill, we get together and we fight it. If the bike industry needs to know about a good bill, then we'll build a coalition in support of the bill and really try to get that passed. So we really are the eyes and the ears for the bike industry in issues that matter. Lastly, as you probably know, where people generally bicycle on property that's in a public right-of-way or owned by a local, state, or federal government. So we really need to be active in state and federal governments in advancing bicycling, since that's where the people who use these products and bicycle riders like to recreate and use them for transportation. So it's critical that we stay active and involved in state legislatures, and we'll talk more about that today. So I'm going to go through a lot of alphabet soup here, and just in the interest of creating concise slides, I've abbreviated all these states to their 2-letter abbreviations. So bear with me here, but just kind of want to give a sense of some of the good bills that are either under consideration or have already passed in many states. So first on the list here is safe passing bills. So these would protect bike riders and require that when a vehicle is passing a bike rider, they do so either with 3 feet or 5 feet, or just give ample operating space to the bike rider. And on their face, this doesn't create more bicycle riders. I mean, it might create a couple, but what it does is it really signals to car drivers and anyone driving a vehicle, such as a truck or anything else, that when you see a bike on the road, you need to value them and you need to protect them and give them enough space for operating. So hopefully this will protect lives and also signal to vehicle drivers that bikes have a place on the road. So you'll see here the states where this is being considered. And I would say compared to last session and previous sessions, these are doing pretty well. There's a bike making good, or a bill related to safe passing making good progress in Texas and in Indiana, and a couple other here. So hopefully we'll see some strides there. Complete streets bills. So these are good as well because they require either local or state agencies to adopt complete street plans. And these are plans that designate how a city should construct its streets in acknowledgement that bikes have a place to go on those streets. So when you're building new streets, for example, they need to be quote unquote complete, and they need to allow space, bike lanes or protected bike lanes for bikes. And this really makes it a law that when a city does design new streets, they need to do so with complete streets in mind. So these are excellent bills for better infrastructure. Next on the list here is vulnerable user bills. So what these do is they assign criminal penalties to anyone who caused harm with a vehicle to bike riders. And while it may seem like a no-brainer, there are a number of states that don't have this in their state law. So these are great ones as well. Infrastructure funding bills. So these are bills that dedicate more money from either a general fund or transportation fund or multimodal fund to better bike infrastructure. And a lot of states don't take advantage of the federal funding for their for bicycle opportunities and bicycle infrastructure in their state, and they also don't dedicate enough money for it at the state level. So again, in these states considering infrastructure funding bills, if these bills pass, we'll see more money in the state coffers for bike infrastructure and generally pedestrian infrastructure as well. Some others that we're tracking are some Idaho stop bills. So if you're not familiar, these are bills that would authorize a bike rider to ride through at a safe speed stop sign. And we know that those can generally protect cycling safety as well. Some bills that would prohibit texting while driving, which are critical to ensuring bicyclist safety. And some bills that would require some bicycle safety education when folks take their driver's ed exam. So these are all bills that we consider very good. We're actively in support of them, and we hope they all pass. I wanted to highlight three that are especially good. So Washington House Bill 1986, this one unfortunately didn't pass, but I think it was an excellent idea. And what I hear from advocates in Washington is that this might be introduced next year. And it provides just a good kind of messaging framework for how e-bikes can help decrease single occupancy vehicles. So what it did was, or what it would have done, is exempt the purchaser of an electric bicycle from paying sales tax on that e-bike. So that could save a few $100s on the purchase price of an e-bike and really drive people to purchase e-bikes. So again, unfortunately that didn't pass, but next year it'll be reintroduced hopefully. Utah House Bill 208, so they this did pass, and they appropriated an extra $500,000 for Safe Routes to School programs. So Safe Routes to School, they create and designate safe places for kids to bike and walk to school. So, $500,000 seems like a lot. It's not a ton to do a lot, but it can help kind of build better places for those kids to ride to school. And it can go a long way in Utah. And in Wisconsin, this bill is going back and forth on whether it will pass or not in a variety of different forms, but it's kind of an interesting one. Last year, the state of a Wisconsin legislator was able to introduce and shepherd through the legislature a bill that said that a local or state government can't use property through eminent domain for bikeways or recreational trails. And this doesn't happen that often, but it was kind of a slap in the face of new bike infrastructure that might need to be on a public right of way or might need to be on land that should be condemned. So, in rural areas, especially when you need a little bit of private land just for quick passages or whatnot, it would have prevented that from happening. And this did pass last year. So looking to have that repealed this year to just help build better cycling networks. So electric bike bills, moving on here. So something we do track very closely and we actively introduce these bills are bills that update the definition of an electric bicycle in state vehicle codes. And so many of you probably have heard me talk about this before. Many state vehicle codes don't define an e-bike as a bicycle and rather as a motorized vehicle. And that's a really confusing spot for retailers and for consumers if there's no clear law around the operation of an e-bike. So up until 2018, 11 states had really great three-class e-bike laws, and we've already passed that law in 4 states in 2019. So Idaho, New Jersey, South Dakota, and Wyoming, and we're actively working in 10 more states. So my hope is that by the end of 2019, we'll have 3-class e-bike bills or laws in 20 or 25 states, which would be really wonderful for the industry, just clarifying where you can ride an e-bike. And this last bullet point are the states where that already have or are really close to having that 3-class e-bike law. So that's something we worked on really actively with retailers and the industry in these states. Last here on our good list, offices of outdoor recreation. So these are dedicated offices within either a governor's office or a state department that dedicates someone to defending the interests of the bike industry to help protect and expand places for bicycling and outdoor recreation. So in other words, think of a champion within state government that understands the industry and that seeks to advance better places for people to play outside. And we know that by virtue of having that person, the bike industry can thrive because this person is helping build better bike infrastructure. So there are already offices of outdoor recreation in 8 states, you'll see here at the bottom, and then 7 other states are actively considering them for this year. So California, Indiana, Massachusetts, Minnesota, New Hampshire, New Mexico, and West Virginia. So if you are in one of these states and wish to kind of express your support of one of these bills, that would go a long way, and my contact info is at the end, so we can partner on those. Now on to bad bills. So these are bills that, as I mentioned before, might have onerous kind of operational requirements or new fees on the purchases of e-bikes or bicycles, or just a variety of different ways that folks are looking to tax or make bike riding harder. So 3 that I wanted to highlight at the top here that we're really actively fighting. California Assembly Bill 1286, in fact, seeks to regulate electric scooter share, but they define electric scooter share as bike share as well, and applies a lot of onerous insurance requirements on operators of electric scooter and bike share as well. So we're looking to strip the word bike from that bill so that it really only regulates what it intends to do, the electric scooter share industry. In Washington, House Bill 5971 would have applied an additional 1% tax on the purchases of all bikes and e-bikes. What we've heard is that this is likely not to go anywhere, but it's not dead yet. So in Washington, they actually do apply additional sales tax on automobiles and auto parts and a number of other things. So it's not a first for the state of Washington, but obviously we don't want to place any additional fees or taxes on the purchases of bicycles. And then the last here, my personal favorite is $10 bike, or not favorite, $10 bike registration in North Carolina. So House Bill 15 would require the operator of any bicycle to have a license plate on the back of their bike that they could purchase for $10. There's a pretty active coalition against this bill, and there are even some good media stories about it. My hope is that it doesn't go anywhere. What I've heard is that it's really one legislator who has a few constituents in his district who don't like bicycles sharing the road on their rural highways. So, this was his solution to somehow deterring that use, which is a bad policy solution. So we're actively fighting this as well. If you're a business or industry in North Carolina, we would love your help on this as well. The rest here, the last 8, I'm not going to go through them one by one. Honestly, none of these have a very good likelihood of passing and going anywhere, but we are actively fighting them. So these would be extra helmet requirements for bicycle riders, high visibility clothing requirements for daytime riding, a trail pass, for example. So we're not in support of these bills. We're actively fighting them, but it's important that we keep track of them and that we monitor them to make sure that if they do have any breath in them, that we can fight them. So if you're in one of these states and want more information or to sign a letter or whatnot, let me know. On to some better news. So Vote for Bikes is what I mentioned up until now. These are all bill measures, so things in state legislatures. On the ballot side, and kind of through the electorate, there are 9 different initiatives that we're tracking this spring. And we have generally a pretty robust fall Vote for Bikes campaign, since most elections happen in the fall. But there are a lot of ballot measures that happen in the spring too. So we're tracking those. We've tracked 9 different ballot measures in, let's see, 7 different states that, if they all pass, would contribute $450 million towards a variety of things: parks, open space, new trails, new biking infrastructure. So all these ballots are worded slightly differently and have different funding mechanisms, but these are dedicated sources of money for ultimately some bike infrastructure. So 2 measures in Florida, one in Jupiter, Florida, and one in Hollywood, Florida, passed last week. There was a measure in Georgia, that was in Florida. There's a measure in Georgia that did not pass yesterday at the ballot box. I think about a 54 to 46% vote. That would have been a pretty big chunk of change in Gwinnett County, Georgia, for better public transportation, public transit, and bike infrastructure. So that unfortunately didn't pass, but we have a number of others in Alaska, Louisiana, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Texas that are before the voting electorate between now and mid-May. So if you're in one of those states and want to learn more and motivate perhaps some of your customers or industry stakeholders, check out the website there. And one last main topic here, and we get a lot of questions about this, so I wanted to include it on our in our webinar today, is about electric scooters. So the electric scooter share industry, led by companies we've probably all heard of: Jump and Bird and Lime and Lyft and Spin and such. These folks are actively looking to pass bills in states that update how their product is defined in state vehicle codes. And so that might sound a little complicated, but basically creates a definition for what their product is in the state's laws, because right now that doesn't quite exist. And so that, the bike industry is supportive of that. What a lot of these companies are also trying to do in their bills is assign the same rights that bicyclists enjoy, where they can ride, how they can ride, to electric scooters. And we are reserved about that. We consider that electric scooters and bicycles don't necessarily need to be traveling in the same places, and because the products are quite different and there are a lot of safety concerns with electric scooters, legislators should be a little bit more careful in assigning all the same rights to electric scooter operators that they do bicycle riders. So we're in some instances, we're kind of neutral on those bills, but we're monitoring them very closely to make sure that bicycles are kept quite separate from electric scooters. So never want to waste this opportunity to empower many of you to have your voice and support bills or oppose bills in many of those states that you saw. So as I mentioned at the top of the webinar, the best kind of recipe for either fighting or fighting for or against a bill is combining business interests with advocates and legislators. So by walking into a meeting and saying, you know, I'm a local business owner, or I run this manufacturing facility and I employ X number of people and contribute X dollars to the local economy, that is a really powerful argument and a lead-in to what you're about to ask the legislator to do, either amend a bill or support a bill. And so those numbers that I showed at the beginning that we're an $81 billion industry, we can parse that out by state and really help you develop an argument that can get you a meeting with a legislator, or at least you can add to a letter in support or against a bill. So the point here is that we have a strong voice, and if we speak in a united way against or for a bill, you know, our voices will be heard. So if you are interested in helping on any of these bills, or you know, have more questions about them, the ways that we can help is we can write some letters, either support or against a bill. We can provide you some talking points. We can kind of explain what the bill does. A lot of us are policy wonks and you know, can read dense legislative language and translate into what it actually means for the bike industry. And then we can help connect you with folks on the ground, legislators and advocates who would listen to your arguments and take a meeting. But what the industry can do is tell your story and be the expert. You're the product expert, you know your business best, and you really know how a bill would actually affect your business and the people who like to ride in your area. And there are lots of different ways that you can help, whether you know you have 10 minutes or 10 hours. A quick phone call just in support or against a bill goes a long way. Writing a letter, or at least signing a letter that we help draft, is a quick, easy thing to do. Attending meetings and meeting with legislators and explaining the power of your business and who your customers are and what your demographics are, for example, that is really informative to legislators too, and they're very interested in the business aspect of their constituency. And just rallying fellow retailers, industry advocates, riders, so that we're all on the same page and share a voice about our priorities goes a long way as well. So on that note, we would not be able to do this work without the support of the People for Bikes Coalition, and all the companies represented on here in very large ways help us do this work on a daily basis. So we're eternally grateful to everyone in our coalition that with their dues help support this work. And if you're not a People for Bikes Coalition member and you'd like to be involved, know that your work helps this, or your funding helps this work on a daily basis. Get more people riding bikes, secure better funding for bike infrastructure, and just helps us elevate our voice at the local, state, and federal level for better bicycling for all. So if you would like to support this work, and if you would like to be a coalition member or learn more, contact our Vice President of the Business Network, Jen Dice, and I'm sure she'd be thrilled to hear from you. So we have time for questions, which is always my favorite part. If you have any questions for me that you don't want to share on the webinar, just please send me a note, and I'd be more than happy to have a phone conversation or email conversation. And now we have time to take questions from the group here. So I see a couple here. So from Karen here, she said, can you expand on your interest and activity on scooter laws? So, yep, so first and foremost, we track them all. I mentioned that we have about 27 different states with 41 active bills. Our interest is to make sure that, you know, very specifically that some of the scooter bills don't implicate electric bikes. You know, in a number of the states where we've passed an electric bike law, the scooter industry, in some instances, wants to add the definition of their product to the definition of an e-bike. And we consider electric scooters and bikes and e-bikes to be quite different. So looking to make sure that they're defined separately in state law, since they're different devices. And then, as I mentioned before, the scooter industry is taking a position saying that electric scooters are not bicycles and they shouldn't be assigned the same rights. And so what we're actively and actually doing is writing letters to bill sponsors and committee chair women and men saying bikes and scooters are different products. They should be regulated differently, and you should take great care in deciding how electric scooters are regulated to ensure the safety of your constituents. So really trying to maintain a difference between the way bikes and scooters are regulated. Next question here is, can People for Bikes supply endorsement letters for specific bike trail projects? So we certainly can. We can't do it all. Well, I guess what I'm trying to say is we love it when we get requests to support things that are being led by the local advocates. So if you ever need a support letter from People for Bikes, just please contact me, Morgan, Morgan at peopleforbikes.org, and I'd be happy to have the conversation. Next question here from John. There's a concern not so much about scooter bicycle parity, but more about personal delivery device and bicycle parity. The question was if other states besides Washington have a personal delivery device bill moving. Yep, a number of other states do, and John, I can be in touch with information about the bills we're tracking that do define personal delivery devices and then kind of assign rights to where they're allowed to go. Quick question here from Bradley about getting a copy of the presentation, and the webinar will be posted on our website that has the presentation. Next question here from Joanna, what People for Bikes has done to actively fight Senate File 1267 in Minnesota. So this was the $10 trail fee. So we're lucky that we have QBP, Quality Bicycle Products, up in Minnesota, and we've heard from Matt Moore, whom some of you might know, their general counsel, that this bill is likely not to go anywhere given some of the political dynamics. So right now we haven't actively fought that bill because we've heard that it just doesn't have any legs. If we hear from our friends up in Minnesota that it's either getting a committee hearing or it is gaining traction, then what we typically do is we'll get a letter on file saying we oppose it on behalf of the bike industry. We'll place some calls and really assign some industry and retailer folks to go and testify against the bill. All right, that concludes our list of questions. I just can't stress enough that we want to work on behalf of the bike industry to fight a lot of these bad bills and advance the good bills, and we are a resource on a daily basis for any questions or any support you need for things happening on the local level. So please never hesitate to be in touch with me or anyone on our business network team, and we look forward to partnering. That concludes our webinar. We're so thrilled to have almost 100 people join us today and hope this was informative. As I mentioned, it'll be posted on our website very shortly, and we wish everyone a wonderful day. Thanks so much.
The broadcast